Hello everyone. Whoops, that's way too far away. Okay, that's better. Jeez. Okay, let's try that. Today we are going to review the movie The Shallows, starring Blake Lively. In this movie, her name is Nancy. So, I guess basically this story starts off with Nancy going to this beach that her mother went to when she was pregnant with her. I'm assuming by the judging from the end of the film that her mother has passed away, so that's kind of why she's going to this beach in kind of memory of her mother, I guess, because that's where, yeah, she calls it her and her mom's island, basically. So she is a surfer. I don't really know whether she's professional or she just kind of does it as a hobby because she does talk about going to medical school in this movie. So anyhow, she was supposed to go to this beach with her friend, but her friend, when they were on this vacation, I guess got way too drunk the night before and decides not to go with her. So that kind of sets up for the rest of this movie because she goes out surfing off this island and meets these two guys in the water. They travel back in, and that's when she's going back out for one more wave, and then she sees these dolphins. So she follows them out a little farther than she probably should, and she runs into this whale that's in the shallows. And that's when she runs into the shark that is, I guess, close to the whale. I'm not really sure. Yeah, I guess basically it might have been feeding on the whale or it was close to the whale, or at least it was in the shallow water around that area. So that the scene where she's surfing back up to, like, away from the whale, you can see the shark coming at her in the wave, and she hits the shark with a surfboard, goes underwater. So she swims. Was it? I think she might have been swimming. Oh, yeah, she was swimming back to her surfboard when the shark comes up and bites her and drags her back underwater. So she then has to swim back out to the whale and get on top of it. Luckily, she listened to the two guys that told her that when the low tide comes in, the one part of the rocks basically kind of turns into like a small island. So, but they said don't go there because there's this coral, I believe it's called, that stings you. It's not poisonous, but it does really hurt. So anyhow, she stays on top of this whale for I don't know how many hours before the low tide comes in and she decides to swim to the rock. She gets there, she's there for I don't know, a couple of days. At least a day, I think, a day or two before these other guys finally come back to do another surf. But before all that, I believe it actually might have been the next day, because can't remember whether it was the drunk guy on the beach was before. No, that must have been before the other two guys came back. Yeah, I think it was because the drunk guy on the beach goes to steal from her, and then goes into the water to take her surfboard, and ends up being like literally bitten in half by the shark and then washed up on shore. They don't show that part just because it's a little too graphic. They just show him kind of dragging his top half of his body back up onto the beach, and that was probably graphic enough. But I guess this movie was supposed to be kind of more geared towards the horror aspect of, geared more towards, I guess, thriller horror type of deal with the shark. But this is a serious possibility that this could happen, I guess, to anybody really. So these two guys come out for their surf again. She's trying to wave them down to let them know that there's a shark. The one guy just gets eaten right off the bat, and the other guy swims to her. The wave comes up, and then he disappears under the water and gets killed by the shark as well. So now three people have died due to this shark. Now, I would say probably 15, 20 years ago, this movie probably wouldn't have made much sense. But they've kind of dug into how sharks behave compared to how they used to behave, and because there's not as much food in the actual oceans anymore for them, they are coming into shallower waters, and, well, humans hang out in shallower waters, so they're finding a different food source, which is why shark attacks have actually risen within the last, I don't know, 10 to 12 years or something. I'm not sure how much. It's not like a huge change, but it is enough to have some sort of concern for at least wildlife and humans as well, because obviously we don't want to be the main food group on the sharks list. But I will say this movie, the makeup effects were really good, because I would say that a lot of movies, it just seems like the person looks completely fine no matter what happens to them. Somehow they always look like they've got makeup on the next day when they wake up. But, I mean, some scenes in the sun, maybe she was made up a little bit. But, I mean, I guess in the daylight, you're probably going to, I don't know. She did look a little bit made up in the sunlight, but maybe that's just because it was daytime and it wasn't as dark and it didn't show all of the cuts and bruises, I guess, as well as, like, it seemed like the darkness showed a lot more of what was going on with her, and maybe that was their main focus. They wanted it to be like, kind of like the nighttime was the bad time of day, and the light was kind of like the good time of day, so they made her look a little bit better in the daytime. I don't know. But I would say that the makeup and visual effects in this movie were fairly good, because a lot of times the creature that's after them tends to look fake, but as far as I'm concerned, the shark looked real through most of this movie. I mean, sometimes you could tell that obviously what was happening wasn't necessarily possible, but then again, who knows? Maybe, I mean, this shark was pretty big for, I believe it was a great white, but it was a pretty big shark. I would say probably like 20, 30 feet, and even that would have been probably not a high possibility 10 to 15 years ago, but I guess sharks are kind of growing in size again. So it works for this movie. But she had to go through quite a bit, from being bitten on the surfboard to being stung by coral reef to having to stay on this rock and tie her leg with a tourniquet. And then she has to, like, suture up her own cut. I'm not really sure whether she used, like, her earrings to close it, or part of her, like, necklace that was sharp. I'm not really sure what she jabbed through her leg, but she had something to keep the cut closed enough so that she wasn't losing too much blood. Eventually, the high tide comes back in, and she has to get off of the rock and go over to this buoy that's in the water. So she starts timing the shark on her wristwatch as to how many seconds it takes for the shark to get from the whale to the rock and then go back around again. It's about 32 seconds. Because she's trying to get out and get the camera off of the one guy that died that she tried to save, but unfortunately he was, like, taken right out of her hands. So she is able to get the camera and record her own kind of, I guess, it's kind of sad in a way. She basically records, like, her own obituary, because she doesn't think that she's going to make it off of the rock into the buoy. So she just says on the video that if anybody finds this, to send it to her family, to, I guess, kind of let them know that at least she lived out her last days as best she could, being stuck in the water with this shark that's basically just hunting her down. So she does make it out to this buoy, and this was closer to the end of the movie, and that scene was pretty intense, but she does finally find a way to lure the shark and kill it. So the shark pretty much destroys the buoy completely. She is able to stab it when she's getting onto the buoy. At one point, she sees the ship in the distance, so she tries to shoot off the flares from the flare gun on the buoy, but to no success. So then the shark tips it over, begins destroying it. She ties herself to the last chain that's holding the buoy together, and it drags her down to the bottom, and she moves at the last second as the shark's coming down to basically grab her, and she moves because there's all these, I don't know, look like something had wrecked underneath the water maybe, and that's how she kills the shark, and then all the dust comes up. And then, ironically, the kid who finds the video camera is the son of the person who drove her to the beach at the beginning of the movie. So I guess the movie kind of came full circle, which was funny. But it was good that somebody actually finally found her and cared enough to save her and not just try to rob her or ended up dying from the shark. So during this movie, some of the things, because I guess she went to medical school, especially when she's trying to heal herself, she's talking herself through it so that she doesn't pass out from the pain, although in a few scenes I believe she did, especially when she had to take her wetsuit and rip a piece of it off and use it as a compression brace type thing for her leg so that the sutures didn't come out, I guess, or at least if they did, it would hold that cut together better. And her only companion, unfortunately, on this rock was a bird until she was able to help heal the bird. And at the end of the movie, when she gets washed ashore and saved, she sees the bird on the beach. So I guess it was kind of like symbolism there that they ended up both making it. And then she has a vision of her mother, and she tells her mother that she's okay. And then we go to a year later, and I thought in this movie she loses her leg, but I guess she doesn't in this movie, and she's back out to surfing. So I guess she didn't let what happened to her a year before overtake her life and make her scared to go back out on the water. So she overcame her fears, I would say, because having that traumatic of an experience all alone in the water out there with a shark that's acting abnormally, at least for sharks, would be quite traumatic, I would think, especially after trying to find any way to survive and eventually kill it. So yeah, I would give this movie an 8 out of 10. It was an enjoyable film. Not one that I would say I would watch all the time, but as far as movies go with sharks in it, this was definitely one of the better ones. The only downfall was that in some parts you could tell that what was happening was, as far as I'm concerned, somewhat unrealistic. But, I mean, the behaviors of sharks are changing a little bit, so I suppose because the shark was actually probably hurt by a human, maybe it was acting more aggressively when people were coming out into the water because it didn't want it saw them as a threat. So I suppose animalistic behavior like that does make some sort of sense. So they did a good enough job with the storyline to kind of make this make more sense than like Jaws, where it just randomly attacks people, or other shark movies, where it's a little more B-rated, like Sharknado or something ridiculous like that. But I will probably do reviews of those in the future too. So anyhow, that's all I have to say for this film. Please like, share, and subscribe, and comment down below your thoughts on this film if you've seen it. And if you haven't, I highly recommend going to see this movie, or, well, not going to see it, but watching it if you haven't seen it already. And I will see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye for now.